the most important thing we learned this summer is that more this week on the couch. No more special times on the couch than when we're joined by Paul Charchian. Paul, we've learned a lot this summer. What's the most important thing you've learned this summer?
That's such a broad statement, right? I mean, I could give you a life answer. We could talk about so many different things, but if I were going to like categorize it really broadly, I would say, man, these rookie quarterbacks can play ball. And I love what I have seen from Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels and even Drake May coming around and JJ McCarthy in glimpses before he went down, and their systematic rise up my rankings over the course of the summer has been really fun because I want to love these players, and we don't have a bust story with these rookie running backs yet. I don't have anybody that, although Bo Nix worries me a bit, but I know right now I'm feeling really, really good about these players and their ability to feed their receivers and power their offenses. And so I'm just gaining more and more confidence in my Bears and my Commanders. And I really like the position these rookie running backs have put us in, quarterbacks have put us in.
Yeah, especially in the wake of all of the disaster in the 2021 class and the 2022 class. And CJ Stroud, of course, leading the way for us last year. And absolutely, CJ Stroud, as you said, what he did, who had the Texans offense as the biggest turnaround last year. It makes you open to that for Chicago. It makes you open to that for Washington. Maybe not for New England. Maybe kind of for Denver, maybe kind of a little bit for Denver, not a lot. But first, at quarterback, is there any obviously it's Superflex leagues, Drake May, Bo Nix, price going up, worth the ticket, even if May doesn't start week 1 because of their rushing upside and because, like you said, of what they showed. What about Jaden Daniels? What about Caleb Williams? Are you willing to make these guys your quarterback 1 as your draft plan?
Yes, I am. I think the rushing is going to secure my floor for both of those guys. And I think the passing is going to be good enough and occasionally explosive. So I've got them coming in at quarterback 8 and 9 in my rankings. And they started the summer at like quarterback 14, 15. I felt like I needed to get a lot more comfortable and really get a feel for where they are as NFL players. But now sitting at 8 and 9, that's go to wartime with those guys as QB1s. And even better if, they're in my super flex leagues, of which most of mine are, my non-guillotine leagues. They're sitting in. I love having them as my second quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. I even think you could, as a viable strategy, Paul, you could just take both. Both because they both have top 5, 6 upside. And for week 1, at least, I would feel better leaving Jaden Daniels on the bench against Tampa. If there's any rude awakening coming for Jaden, Tampa's defense is pretty good at rude awakenings. But I believe Chicago draws Tennessee week 1.
Oh,
that sounds
juicy.
That sounds good. So and I'm wondering, I have this sneaking suspicion that Caleb Williams is really going to take the league by storm, or the Bears offense.
Yeah,
that the Bears passing game is really going to put defenses in the spin cycle, because depending on who you ask, Keenan Allen was the most impressive player at Bears training camp, or DeAndre Swift as a receiver out of the backfield, or Rome Odunze. And there's that guy DJ Moore too. So Caleb Williams also, looked to me, Paul, and I know it's preseason, but with rookies, preseason matters. Oftentimes our first indicator, just that intuitive ding, is when you're watching somebody in the preseason. And Caleb Williams, boy, it looks like the game is slow for him. That he's much like Patrick Mahomes. He's just experiencing it slower. He's not daunted by the speed. He's not daunted by the chaos. If anything, in the Matrix Neo kind of way, he knows how to navigate it. And the Patrick Mahomes comparisons are apt because of the odd arm angles, just the ability that he understands in his own body to execute that the defense can't anticipate. And even if the league catches up later on, I feel like Caleb's going to jump out on him, and maybe the Bears offense is one that we're sleeping on. On that note, what about actionable fantasy instructions at other positions because of this rookie quarterback revelation?
Well, I want to start with DeAndre Swift, who I think we're missing the boat on a little bit here. Swift is potentially sitting on a really nice season. And if Caleb Williams is going to power the Bears, and there's a lot of people fretting about which wide receiver game in and game out might be the best one to have. And we've got questions about even the tight end position. Is Cole Kmet going to lose snaps to Gerald Everett? But interesting that through the preseason, go all the way back to the Hall of Fame game, the Bears have used Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson, Travis Homer, and those guys. They're getting run in this offense through the preseason. They're not letting DeAndre Swift near the field. There's a chance that now with the new offensive coordinator Shane Waldron, that he's going to use DeAndre Swift a lot like his usage was in Seattle with Kenneth Walker, where he's going to have a primary back. And Shane Waldron was super run heavy inside the 5-yard line. Nobody threw less passes from inside the 5-yard line over the last 3 years than Shane Waldron did in Seattle. So maybe we're missing the boat a little bit on DeAndre Swift, who's going to be the lead back in this suddenly dynamic Bears offense. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll say this. The big picture for me is 7th, 8th round, usually starts in the 6th. This tier of running backs. So one of the headlines is, for the second straight year, the running back dead zone has shifted down. Yes. And in general, running back value has shifted down. Running backs you can get the 3rd round profile. Often we're going in the 2nd round a few years ago. Running backs you can get in the 5th round. Often we're going in the 3rd round a few years ago. And these running backs in the 6th to 8th round are the dead zone running backs, the classic dead zone running backs, where you hold your nose and you were taking them in the 4th, 5th round. Now they seem like winning propositions in the 6th, 7th, 8th round. And I guess, Paul, what it really stands for are the running backs that we feel reasonably confident will lead their team in touches in the backfield, but we're otherwise hesitant for some reason, right? In the case of Swift, we're hesitant because, well, he's been at 2 different stops now and has been given opportunities to beat the guy, but hasn't seized them. Then again, hey, the Bears, this regime saw him as the #1 priority. He was the first free agent signed, announced. Maybe that means something. But even if you don't like Swift, there's Raheem Mostert, there's Ramondre Stevenson, there's David Montgomery, there's Aaron Jones, and so on. So running back is deep this year. The cost is right, and you should incorporate that in your draft plan in some way. Where I don't want to be, Paul, is like 3 running backs through 5 or 6 rounds, because then I can't take advantage of that. I can't take advantage of that.
Yep.
But to DeAndre Swift himself, look, if he hits this year, we talked about one part of it, that the Bears offense, we might be sleeping on the Bears offense and Caleb Williams. The other part of it is every report out of training camp has been one that he's impressing, that he's standing out, that he looks like a player that is, hey, maybe the fact that he's really wanted. The Bears signed him right away. They didn't make it trade a 4th round pick in the future for him. They wanted him. The Lions, I always wondered how they felt about Swift. It never seemed like the Dan Campbell Lions were really in on Swift.
Yeah, for sure.
And the way they're in on Sione Vaki, I got to mention Sione Vaki at least once. So I'm with you. I think you have to be open to that. And Swift makes as much sense in that 7th, 8th round range as any of those other guys, and just getting a piece of the Bears offense. Because I continue to toy with the idea, Paul, that maybe the most important thing to get right in your draft is not anything about any specific player. It's not positions. It's not timing your picks so it matches with value. It's knowing which offenses will have a good chance to greatly exceed expectations, like across the board.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so the Texans, again, another good example, right, from last year, even though Dameon Pierce didn't work out.
I know.
There's going to be a couple of offenses that the pie is like 25% bigger than any of us forecasted. And if you can get, I think the Ravens are a possibility. The Chiefs are absolutely a possibility here. The Jets, the Jets, if only because we're not giving them any sort of credit for the possibility of if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy and just looks like
plays well.
That I think that's one to think about. And the Bears absolutely belong on that list. Anybody else?
Let's stay with this theme. So rookie quarterbacks who can improve an offense and help other players. I want to give you another running back that I'm really intrigued by, Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah.
Languished last year under awful quarterbacking, for players who are not even going to necessarily be in the league this year. Bailey Zappi getting cut, Mac Jones soundly on the bench, and Stevenson just got ambushed game after game last year. I'm just convinced he's still a good player and has always been a good player that just needs to be put in spots where he can accumulate better fantasy points than he has, which is goal line carries, where he mysteriously has never been used quite enough. And he's got better hands than the number of receptions that he seems to get every year. And I just want to believe that Alex Van Pelt is going to unlock some a little piece of fantasy stardom that we haven't gotten out of Ramondre Stevenson. If you believe that one way or another, New England's quarterbacking situation, whether it's Brissett or Drake May, is going to be good enough to just give Stevenson a chance, the kind of chance that he didn't get last year. So tell me what you think about Stevenson. Yeah. I am cautiously optimistic, and he's sitting right now at running back 14 for me, which is way above ADP.
I have him certainly at the top of that tier. I debate him or David Montgomery or James Conner at the top of that tier. And I think Stevenson might have the highest season-long ceiling just because Conner, we know he's going to miss a few games. And then if Trey Benson shows out, maybe that changes things. But Stevenson, who agrees with you, Paul, is the Patriots. I mean, they gave him, 4 years, $36 million, and they didn't need to. Right. They didn't need to. So they're saying you're a big part of what we do, and you're a big part of what we're going to do. And here's one thing I can say with confidence: the Patriots will have the worst offense in the league. I mean, barring the Raiders may have a little say in there with their quarterback play. Denver, like you said, Bo Nix, we'll see. Certainly the Patriots will be a bottom 5 offensive team, even in the most optimistic scenario. The optimistic scenario is they're closer to the pack in the 20s and not way behind the pack.
Yeah.
But Drake May could be a big part of that picture. And it's been interesting going through the different phases of projecting this offense, because here's one thing that people said at the beginning of this summer that is still true now. The offensive line is horrible.
Yes.
That's bad, really bad, really bad. But Drake May looks like a gamer. He looks like a competitor. And the central question is, do you feel like he is a throw him to the wolves, let him learn on the job, he'll learn from his mistakes, he'll find the limits of his abilities and find that zone where things work? Or is this a situation where you're looking at David Carr? You're looking at Sam Darnold, and you're saying, hey, throwing him to the wolves can ruin him, can imprint terrible, terrible things in a quarterback's habits that he can't really undo. And we'll see. We're going to talk about Sam Darnold. Of course, it's Minnesota. It's Paul. We're going to talk about Darnold. But so, and I don't have a good answer, Paul. I mean, I don't know. Did you let Jacoby Brissett just kind of like a tomato can, let him get beat up for 3 or 4 or 5 games just to let the offensive line maybe get a little healthier, maybe settle in, find the right combination, and then put May out there? But either way, the upside for this offense with May playing the way he did in the preseason looks well greater than what it was if we were projecting it before we got to see May look good. So Ramondre Stevenson has, like you said, has never really gotten a chance to show his full potential, and he probably won't this year. But even his partial potential, he was a 4th round pick last year. Even after Zeke got signed, he was like a 4th round pick. Played well, but the numbers didn't show it because the offense was so bad. Now there's a 3-round discount, and the Patriots have doubled down on him as their feature back.
Yeah, now you're talking my language right now. I'm getting all worked up over Ramondre. This is fantastic. And the Patriots, when they gave away Matthew Judon, it was, clearly they've just packing it in. They're playing for next year. And if that's the mentality, I do hope they wait on Drake May just for his own sake. Now, the kid had to play behind a terrible offensive line in North Carolina. He was constantly trying to, make up for broken line play, trying to, having to run out of the pocket, throw from the run. I mean, he's used to it, but I don't want to put him in that situation. And I do think the guy's got special talent if he's given the right set of circumstances around him. I don't think that team composition is there now. And I hate to wreck the kid through the first half of this season, potentially wreck him by putting him in a really bad spot. So I'd prefer for Drake May's long-term success for him not to start. If it were up to me, teams don't always have the willpower to do that.
And the owners don't always have the willpower. Owners don't always have the willpower to do that. That's the thing. And the Patriots are absolutely squarely in that, as the owner putting his thumb on the scale in these decisions. Is that why it seems like poor Jared Mayo is changing the criteria for the starting quarterback depending on the day you talk to him. So we'll see. But I think it is exciting. It's exciting to think about May. It's exciting to think about Knicks. I don't think there's any actionable stuff there. Denver fantasy is an absolute mess. But Knicks could be interesting with his running ability and as an extension of Sean Payton. Like Sean Payton's got the joystick and Bo Nix is out there on the field doing what Sean Payton wants him to do. We talked about Caleb Williams and the Bears. I still love Rome Odunze. I feel like in the 6th round, Rome Odunze, or if he's still there, Xavier Worthy. Let's dip into some rookie excitement there.
Yeah.
And then I want to mention Terry McLaurin with Jaden Daniels. I've mentioned it a lot. I want to just drive 5th round. I'm fine with taking him in the 4th round because McLaurin's never had a quarterback like Jaden Daniels before.
Right.
Now,
can he? We really love the deep ball passing stylings of Jaden Daniels. Can Terry McLaurin turn into the deep receiver he has not been to this stage of his career, having this kind of arm talent at the quarterback position?
How does it not happen?
I'd like to think so.
This is the case that I make. And some people just say, well, DJ Moore is better than Terry McLaurin. But look at what Justin Fields did for DJ Moore last year.
Yeah.
So if Jaden Daniels can be as effective as Justin Fields, chances are we're going to see career highs for Terry McLaurin. Just how high? Well, we'll see. I'm not that confident in Cliff Kingsbury to maximize what's going on here. They also have a terrible offensive line. Bad. But you would hope the tempo, Cliff Kingsbury is going to be able to maybe mitigate that by just keeping defenses on their heels. Jaden Daniels, 11-on-11 football. And I mentioned Brian Robinson. You can get Brian Robinson like in the 10th round.
Yeah, I don't want him. Well, I don't want him on any of my teams. I understand he's a volume back who does not catch, but you know what? He also doesn't have any power at the goal line. He's turned 17 carries inside the 5 into 4 touchdowns in his career. I can't get excited about not Brian Johnson. That's the guy I work with.
Yeah.
Sorry. Brian Robinson. I can't get myself to find a spot where I draft him and I go, all right, here's how Brian Robinson's going to help me, because it feels like every game I get, 16 carries for 60 yards, and I can find that anywhere.
That's fair. I mean, if you're making the glass half full case for Robinson, it's that he continues to get kudos for his receiving ability out of the backfield. That even with Sam Howell last year, remember the joke, I drafted the wrong B Robinson. Actually, Brian Robinson was outperforming Bijan at times.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Look, it's the 10th round. I'm not going to take anyone to the woodshed either way on a 10th round pick. But it's another one of those examples of a running back we know is going to lead his team in touches and is really cheap. And we'll see. But Washington, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, I thought we were moving on from Washington. I don't
let's go on
hastily. Because you touch on Bo Nix in Denver, and there's just one guy that I want to get your thoughts on. Jaleel McLaughlin is really, really fun. And I want to believe that Sean Payton's going to manufacture 10 to 14 touches a game for him because he's the most dynamic back they've got. But that might just be what I want. And a lot of times what I want does not end up happening on the field whatsoever. Jaleel McLaughlin, your thoughts about him in a Bo Nix offense where he will get rid of the ball quickly. That could be to running backs.
Right.
And Jaleel's got the best hands of the running backs by a mile. Not a lot of threat from tight ends in that offense, or hasn't been historically. What are your thoughts on Jaleel McLaughlin as, let's say a flex player, a second flex player? What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right to bring up flex as part of the question here, because I would say with Jaleel McLaughlin, I want to keep saying John McLaughlin because my favorite.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to eventually get that sorted out in my brain here. It depends on the lineups. It depends on how deep the benches are. It depends on the scoring, because obviously PPR is important here.
Yeah.
McLaughlin PPR is important for his value, especially if you're in a deep league, a 16-team league. If you're in a team that has, like you said, 2 flexes, where you're dipping deeper into the running back pool. He looks like he's going to be Darren Sproles basically in this offense. I mean, we look back through the Sean Payton annals, he's going to play a Darren Sproles kind of role.
Yeah.
He has that, not quite to Sproles' ability, but he's in that archetype of running back. It's not as going to be as good or productive of an offense. But it gives you this 6 to 8 point floor. You're assuming 3-4 catches. Peyton likes to feed the running backs. It makes sense with the wide receivers they have and tight ends to feed the running backs. And he will occasionally break some big plays. But what you're weighing him against, Paul, are picks like the rookie backups, the speculative holes.
Yes.
Like Amani Vidal or Bucky Irving or Braylon Allen, or so it just depends on your build. It depends on if it's the kind of league where running back is picked clean at the beginning of the season in the draft, and there's rarely, even if somebody who's going to get touches, people jump on the waiver wire. Well, often has more value there because that depth, especially as you get to the bye week gauntlet, is going to be more important. If it's a team where you only have 4 or 5 bench spots and you're constantly churning your waiver wire, well, maybe not. But I love him as a player. I love to say Youngstown State Penguins. I love that.
Yeah, you never get to say that, right?
Right.
Oh, it's fun.
So I do think that he is set up for that role. And I'll say this: if there is a Broncos player that I feel happy that I drafted, he's probably the number one most likely. I don't think it's going to be a receiver. I don't think it's Javonte Williams. I don't think it's Greg Dulcich. Maybe Bo Nix in Superflex leagues. That could be good. That could be fun. I teased it. So let's go ahead and cut to the Minnesota Chase. Sam Darnold. Crazy to think that he could do something like what Baker Mayfield did in Tampa last year.
I think he can. What a spot to drop in for him for a career resurrection. And by the way, for the bettors out there, his comeback player of the year is sitting at like 30-1. And he just fits the archetype of that so well. There's a real scenario here where Sam Darnold you look at all the things that surrounds him right now, and you can't ask for a better spot for him to be dropped into. You turn left, there's Justin Jefferson. You turn right, there's Jordan Addison. By mid-October, you're going to have TJ Hawkinson rumbling over the middle of the field. You've got Aaron Jones as the best pass-catching running back we've seen in this Kevin O'Connell offense by a fair margin. And most importantly, you've got Kevin O'Connell, a former quarterback coach, now head coach, who put Kirk Cousins on big, big jumps in his career. Remember, Kirk Cousins was leading the NFL in passing yards, on pace for a 5,000-yard season when he went down with the Achilles injury. And now here comes Sam Darnold with all of the horrible spots that he's dropped into. Sig, I went through and looked at every head coach that he had in when he had to start games. So not San Francisco, but in the 4 or 5 years before that.
Right.
And all the offensive coordinators that he had worked with. So it was a group of about 10 guys. One of those coaches is employed in the NFL today.
What if it's Sam Darnold's fault? No,
right? Now maybe that's it.
Coach killer.
Where's cause and effect on this is up to debate. But man, he's been in such terrible spots that, maybe now with everything in a position for him to succeed, you got bookend tackles, excellent tackles on the offensive line. It's just the right spot for Sam Darnold. Now, working against him, I should mention the schedule. The Vikings opening schedule is brutal. They get the Giants in week 1, which doesn't sound like much, but that defensive line that they've built.
Brian Burns,
Dexter Lawrence. It's that
Kayvon Thibodeau.
Right, Kayvon Thibodeau. So that could be a problem. Then they go Niners, obviously tough. They get the much improved Houston secondary, Packers, Jets, bye week. And so I worry a little bit that Sam Darnold won't survive that early gauntlet. He'll get kicked to the curb in week 6. And then you and I will talk roughly week 7, given our cadence. And we'll be talking about picking up Sam Darnold for a much easier part of the schedule after that.
Yeah. I am intrigued, Paul, simply because the structure, as you were alluding to, the structure around him with the Jets and Carolina was horrendous.
Yeah.
And a team that creates a really robust structure for their quarterback, the 49ers, they were hot and heavy. According to Cecil, Kyle Shanahan has always had eyes for Darnold. Yeah. And that tells me that much like Bo Nix and Sean Payton, that he is seen as a quarterback that if you take a lot of the guesswork out for him and you put him in structure, he can execute. And that's exactly what Minnesota's offense does. Let's go real quick through just kind of a cold, lukewarm, hot on the rest of the 49ers for fantasy. So Justin Jefferson, I got the number 4 pick. Is it Justin Jefferson?
I've got him 5. I've got him after Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I have him 6 overall. So I have no problem with taking Justin Jefferson there. That whole Vikings offense goes through him, and they'll do it. I mean, they will pound the ball into Justin Jefferson. And in as much as heavy usage as he's had in the past, this is still a pass-first offense, and they are going to throw to him a ton. Volume will be on your side, and obviously Jefferson's a fantastic player. I have no problem with him. You can make a case that I'm listening to as high as really 2 if you love Justin Jefferson, but just understand Sam Darnold puts a governor on people's expectations, and reasonably so.
Right, that's the problem, or maybe the reason it works out. We already mentioned Ramondre Stevenson. We already, again, these running backs, DeAndre Swift, these running backs in that part of the draft. Another one, Aaron Jones.
Aaron Jones is a really interesting guy in that we know he's going to catch passes, but we also know, and he can be an inside out runner, super dynamic. The worry is, can you afford to give him the ball more than 14, 15, 16 times a game? And I don't think anybody feels like Aaron Jones is that guy. When I stood next to Aaron Jones not that long ago, and he's just a small dude. There's just not a lot to that guy. And, you can see the frailty is shown itself on his nonstop questionable statuses. And I can't get myself to push him ahead of volume players like Josh Jacobs or Ramondre Stevenson.
Right.
I just think the upside is capped, but the Vikings will use him. Ty Chandler's still a total wild card in this offense. And, he makes nice plays in the open field, and then he does dumb things in the backfield. Either missing holes. He almost sacked his own quarterback in a preseason play. He has dropped passes. It's just the small parts of the game haven't come to Ty Chandler quite yet.
Yeah, in that answer, and this is a great answer for fantasy football, because in that answer are all the clues, and they're going to lead to the outcome. The outcome might be that, well, they just have to use Aaron Jones more because they trust him, and he at least held up at the end of the year last year for like 4 straight games. And look, again, I mean, the nice thing about Aaron Jones, the nice thing about Raheem Mostert, I think is another one, that you can go in to the 7th round with Stevenson as your target, or Dave Montgomery as your target, or DeAndre Swift, or whoever, and say, well, hey, if I have to take Aaron, that's not horrible. Aaron Jones, again, with his profile, is more of a 4th, 5th round type running back in years past. Now he's a 7th, 8th round running back. I don't know. I don't think Jordan Addison's that interesting. I don't know. You want to tell me? He is more interesting,
okay. I'm kind of interested in him just because it's been all bad news, and his ADP has fallen, and it's all self-imposed bad news. But he's a really good player, and he showed tremendous promise last year on the field.
Sure,
he had a 900-yard rookie season, 10 touchdowns, and granted, Justin Jefferson was off the field for a lot of those 10 touchdowns, but also TJ Hawkinson's going to be off the field for a lot of time.
Sure.
He's legitimate number 2 in the team that I think had the 5th highest passing play percentage last year. So I kind of like buying the dip on Jordan Addison. And, I don't think he's going to get suspended this year. I don't think he's going to, I don't think that the legal situation is going to end up impacting him right now. And you get a lot of, you get a lot of value in the 10th round where he's going roughly. Yeah.
You bring up a good point that the high part of the season will be early on when Hawkinson is sitting. So if he's really a dud, then when you can just move on quickly. But in the meantime, you might get a wide receiver 3 for a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, just strictly by being out there because of the number of pass targets. And again, it just comes back to what you think about Darnold. Okay, the last Hawkinson, and I'll say my piece on him after you do, but I'm picking up positive vibes. I certainly don't feel that you're going to tell people don't take Hawkinson.
Yeah, the outlook, the injury outlook is a little more positive than we thought it might be, but he is on the PUP list. So, you'll have to, obviously, we're out for 4 games mandatorily.
Right.
But there's a real scenario that week 5, it's kind of game on for him. we might be looking in whatever that is, like the second week of October. And he's not that far off of full speed because he was a little bit ahead of where we thought he would be through training camp. So yeah, there's a chance here. Still lots of unknowns, and the team never says anything definitive about players that are injured in the fashion he is. So, we don't know, a lot of moving parts, but I will just, the vibe that we've gotten and the work that he's done suggests he's a little bit ahead of schedule. And again, might hit the ground coming out of off the pup list with a little more activity than you might otherwise think. If the traditional coming out of ACL is a really slow ramp up, he might hit the ground a little bit more than people think.
Yeah, I'm all about it. I find it hard sometimes, Paul, to take falling tight ends that are values, because my favorite strategy at tight end this year is waiting for Hawkinson. And then there's so many late round tight ends. Everybody's going to have different ones. But I think everybody, unlike years past, I think everybody should have at least 1 or 2 late round tight ends they're really excited about.
Who are you targeting? I want to tell you mine after you tell me yours. I've got one guy that I've really been going after.
My main guy is Jonnu Smith. But if your league software allows Taysom Hill, that is looking more and more interesting by the day.
Yeah. And that's a team that's got a lot of vacated targets, or at least some vacated targets as well. My guy, Zach Ertz.
Sure.
I know everybody's excited about Ben Sennett, but you know what? The vast majority of the rookies, and I know, Sam Laporta changed the whole dynamic a little bit, Dalton Kincaid last year, but Zach Ertz rolling into an offense that he knows with Cliff Kingsbury, who was his coach before. And, he's healthy right now. And I see some, some of that safety valve dump off rookie quarterback stuff coming his way. So I've been targeting Zach Ertz as my second tight end deep in drafts.
Yeah, I think that, and he fits perfectly with Hawkinson.
You
just need him to stay healthy while Hawkinson is on the mend. And then going back to what you were saying about Hawkinson, more than one beat writer has said, when Hawkinson is back, he's going to be central in the offense. And you combine that with Kevin O'Connell saying, I'm trying to breathe down the necks of the staff, the medical staff, to get him back. I'm watching him on the side. I want him out here. I mean, that tells me that, but we're going to do things the right way. He said something to that effect, that they are not managing Hawkinson to say, as soon as he possibly can get on the field, we're getting him on the field. That they already have envisioned that he is a foundational player, and they will not put him back out there until he's ready for resuming that foundational role. That's what I take out of all this when I put it all together, which, I mean, there might be a 1 or 2 week ramp up where we wait and see. And his game isn't predicated on speed and suddenness. I think
right.
He's going to be fine, even with the gnarly injury that he had. And so I love it, because if TJ Hawkinson was healthy, he would be in the debate with Laporta and Kelsey for the #1 tight end. He was producing basically at that clip, and he's in a situation where he should continue to produce at that clip. And you're getting him at this massive discount. Joe Bryant VBD principles here. You're getting a half a season of TJ Hawkinson is worth more than a 10th or 11th or 12th round pick. And the last part that I like to add to the strategy, Paul, is that because tight end is so deep this year, David Njoku is like tight end 9 or 10. Most years his profile would be like tight end 3 or 4 or 5. Tight end is deep this year. The 10th or 11th person to take tight end is going to get Brock Bowers or Dallas Goedert, right? Everyone's going to go into the season, except for all of us Hawkinson drafters, happy with their tight end. So whoever does break out, whoever does have a Tucker Kraft, whoever does have a surprise week 1, you have no competition on the waiver wire. Probably no competition in week 2. Maybe no competition in week 3. So even if you miss on the guys that are going to cover for Hawkinson, you're going to be able to just pick whoever's been hot at the beginning of the year until Hawkinson comes back. So I love it.
And that's a big change in the tight end dynamic from the past several years. I mean, it has been, that's a priority acquisition. Draft day has been, I got to get one of the 6 tight ends that I feel like I can go to war with, or I'm scrapping on the waiver wire every week against half of the league that's also scrapping on the waiver wire. But thanks to the emergence of Trey McBride and Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid and the presumed return to relevancy of Kyle Pitts, Jake Ferguson as somebody you could potentially go to war with. I mean, suddenly we've got this influx of young talent, and it makes that position feel like one where you have a better chance of sloughing that spot and finding somebody you can work with.
Yeah, just break ties against tight ends. It's tough.
Yeah,
it's really tough to take a tight end early because you're missing that. Now, that being said, I don't care if you even took tight end 1. Still take Hawkinson. Take Hawkinson when he comes back. Then you can trade your Travis Kelce or Sam Laporta and not have it hurt your lineup. Not whether you have an IR. The only exception I would make is maybe, again, leagues with 4 bench spots, 5 bench spots, where there's so much waiver churn at the beginning of the year. You might miss on this year's Kyren Williams. Well, let's talk about Kyren Williams.
Great segue. Let's do it.
Because it all just comes back around to whatever you felt about Kyren Williams at the beginning of this week, you probably still feel right now, but the plot has thickened. So let's just say you draw an early first-round pick, and you're going to be on the clock in the late second, early third round. You know that Kyren Williams is at least a consideration there. What's your advice to folks that are saying, I don't know what to do with Kyren Williams?
I'm out. I'm not doing it. I just feel like at that stage of the draft, there's still so many players that I feel more comfortable with. What worries me about Kyren is last year, and I think he's a good back. I don't think he's a special back. And I don't think there's a mandate to give him the ball anywhere near as much as they did last year. And I don't think they would have drafted Blake Corum where they did if they felt like Kyren Williams was going to be somebody they were going to give the ball to at anywhere near the same level. So I am very concerned. I was before, and then yesterday's news about him returning punts was like, the sirens just go off. You're like, okay, wait, how many how many workhorse backs also return punts? Yeah. Was it punts or kickoffs?
Punts.
Yes. Yeah. Return punts. And I'm like, well, never. I don't know. Right. I mean, this is, this just, it raised way too many concerns for me. So I was already hesitant. Now I'm out. And maybe this is a great buying opportunity and other people see it the other way, but I don't like how this feels.
Yeah.
Sig, what are you doing with Kyren Williams in that spot?
The buying opportunity part is questionable because he has dropped at least early returns, or he has dropped slightly, but not dropped out of his tier or dropped to the end of his tier. The other members of his tier, guys like Isaiah Pacheco, you can have a conversation about Pacheco with the latest news today about the Kansas City backfield. Derrick Henry, and I love Derrick Henry. And it's not like Kyren Williams is now falling down to where Travis Etienne is going. Maybe he is in some drafts, but I think there's enough people that are saying, no, I don't buy it, that he's not going to drop that much. You aren't going to necessarily get that bounce. There are scenarios where he can get 65% of the work, and as long as Blake Corum isn't replacing him at the goal line, which is something to consider because, man, Blake Corum has the classic nose for the end zone. He's just
61 touchdowns in Michigan.
Yeah. I mean, if you have him on your roster and it's time to convert a and goal from the 2, he's the guy whose number you call, especially when you're worried about the durability. Those are runs where you can take a lot of punishment. Kyren Williams could still return value at his current ADP or slightly exceed it, but the scenarios where he could be that clear top 5 back like he was last year, I think that's evaporated. And the punt returner comment just calls that back into our attention. But Jordan Rodriguez, she's really one of the best beat writers out there at communicating stuff to us that she can't actually say straight out. Right? Isn't it interesting, Paul? And you're kind of, since you're a fantasy guy, I think they probably are super tolerant of you, but I know teams are super touchy about what gets reported now.
Yeah,
it's a harder job than ever to just talk about what you see and what you think. When Cecil all the time has to say, I'm not allowed to talk about what happened to practice, but if I was, I might say, so she said something when asked about this. When the punt returner news came up, she said, I will just say that Corum started out with the second team. Then he started getting more with the first team as camp went on.
Yeah.
So the fact that I'm just saying, but we'll see. That's what's great about fantasy football and the big reveal that comes with week one. And then when we it's like we think we know where all the furniture and everything is going to be in the room, but we come into the house with the lights off, and then they turn it on, and we all have to react and scramble all at once. It's wonderful. There's the draft, and they're staking your claims, but again, it's the most agile, the most flexible minds that win out, being willing to accept what's happening in fantasy football. There's one other thing I want to touch on before we go, before we go off the rails. But real quick, with this opportunity, whatever time we've gotten to talk to everybody who joins us here on the couch, thank you, folks. We love you. Wonderful things. Is there anything else, as folks are going to be drafting here? I got the Football Guy staff draft tonight. That you want to just say, hey, as Paul Charchian, as a trusted voice of someone that you've known for decades here in the fantasy space, I want to tell you this before you draft.
Yes, there is one thing. Quit more fantasy leagues. I know what you're thinking. Why would Charch say that? And why would I ever quit more fantasy leagues? It's because there's a lot of bad, boring fantasy leagues. Let the bad, boring owners play with each other. You should get out of those leagues. If you're the kind of person who's watching this and listening to this, you are somebody that wants to be in a vibrant, thrilling fantasy league filled with smack talk and rivalries and trade offers and loser penalties and, in some cases, periodic tasteful nudity. Go get those leagues. Don't just, you joined some league with the accounting department 3 jobs ago and nobody's given you a reason to leave, so you never leave. But your standards should be higher than that. Don't just be in a league where people robotically set their lineups and they make their waiver claims, and there's no chat, and there's no vibrancy, and there's no dynamic. People don't do anything wrong, so you don't leave. Have higher standards. If you're in a league with veto powers for owners, quit that league. If you're in a league with waiver priority for bad teams, quit those leagues. Bad rules, quit those leagues. Boring leagues, quit those leagues. Go find great leagues that match your style of play.
Yeah. Well, and I hope that we have this thing at Football Guys now, the Football Guys home leagues, that hopefully we can start to do that, curate or filter the pool of players so that when you join a league, it's other people that take it seriously, care, and like you said, invest themselves in it emotionally, invest their time and make it meaningful, and maybe make some friends along the way. Okay, last thing I want to ask you about fantasy football wise. How big of a deal? How much should we be factoring this Trent Williams thing in? All summer it's been Ayuk.
Nobody talking about Trent Williams.
Nobody talking about Trent Williams. Now here we are, late August. Mike Garafolo says not close.
Yeah.
And we all know the 49ers are over a barrel here. We all know that the 49ers, the Ayuk situation just highlights it. They are going to have to pay Brock Purdy. Now you're hearing stuff that the way the Nick Bosa, because the Nick Bosa thing resolved itself and it worked out. But there's chatter that they're not happy about. They don't like taking the L, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to say as an aside, I said this on Twitter this morning. It really is fascinating to me that with our most popular sport, our emblematic sport, I know it used to be baseball, but it's professional.
It's football now. Yeah,
it's professional football. In our most emblematic sport, one of the key influences or ingredients in the outcome is how executives make executive decisions about compensation for employees in an artificial system that was set up to maximize their profits. It's like a microcosm, right? It's so perfectly American that, well, okay, maybe you have the best coaches and maybe you have the best players, but what about your executives? Are they good at being executives? And by that, I mean, do they extract the most possible while still making sure that the employees aren't revolting or something like that? As we look at this Trent Williams situation, a much, much bigger deal than Brandon Ayuk. If we're talking about this offense, lots of people, Scott Barrett, my buddy, among others, putting out there the efficiency plummeting when Trent Williams. So Trent Williams has all the leverage here. Trent Williams deserves, right? He should be able to say, this is what I want, and they give it to him. But here we are.
He's been the best tackle in the league for like a decade outside of that, that weird stint where he was not playing when he was in Washington. And that was entirely Washington's fault, by the way. He's great. And when you look at where this offensive line, so as I estimate what this offensive line could look like without Trent Williams, we're talking like Jalen Moore at left tackle, Aaron Banks at left guard, Jake Brendel is your center, Dominic Pooney is the right guard.
He's been a standout. He's been maybe one of the best rookies this preseason. So that one's a hit. There's a hit.
That'd be great. Colton McKivitz is your right tackle.
Right.
I mean, this is,
it could be bad.
It could be bad. I mean, they're way deeper at wide receiver than they are at across the offensive line.
Right. And so, McCaffrey, maybe that's not as consequential because the volume is going to be there, but the touchdowns might not be there and the efficiency might not be there. But guys like, and Deebo Samuel becomes more interesting with Elijah Mitchell on IR because now Deebo has that and McCaffrey's banged up. So Deebo has some rushing upside there. Again, the Ayuk situation, maybe as we speak, it's been settled. I still think he's going to be a 49er, but
I do too.
But much like I said, hey, guessing the offenses that exceed efficiency by a material margin is important to getting the hits, maybe more important than identifying individual players in those offenses. Maybe picking out a few offenses that have the potential to greatly disappoint. Dallas comes to mind too.
Yeah.
Offenses that have the potential to greatly disappoint us and avoiding those offenses. San Francisco is one that's usually a value add in fantasy. And we have to at least be open to the possibility that that's not going to be true while Trent Williams is out if it goes into the regular season. And it sure looks like it's going to.
Yeah. There's, we all believe Kyle Shanahan can just make that work. But that's, you still have to find, you still have to have a certain amount of talent for any coach in any system to work. And I don't know that the Niners have it across that offensive line. And if you're looking to find some reason to not take Christian McCaffrey with the first pick of your draft, this is probably the single best rationale that you could come up with is right here.
Yeah. Or you can say, hey, you add this to that he's already broken the injury seal. That's enough. I mean, in hindsight, this is the thing about fantasy football. Most every player, no matter how it turns out, Paul, we say, we should have known. We should have known. Like, why would you have the pick of the whole football landscape? Yeah. And you're about to take a guy who, number one, is already hurt. And number two is maybe not going to have his best offensive lineman, the best you say, in the game for some part of the beginning of the season. That's not the number one overall. Well, that's why we love fantasy football, because you have to make that call if you draw that pick. But we get to make the call to go off the rails here. And by the way, guillotine leagues, fantasy life, you already know about guillotine leagues, hopefully. And I'm always happy to do my ode to guillotine leagues, the urgency, the mortality every week that comes. There's a guillotine, Paul, there's a guillotine hair salon here. I got to take a picture of it.
What? No way.
It's New Orleans, baby. We got a guillotine hair salon here.
I love it.
It's down in Lower Garden District where I used to live, in the house that did you see the Motley Crue biopic that came out? I think it came out like during at the beginning. There was a Motley Crue biopic. I think it's about 4 or 5 years old, maybe like straight to Netflix or something. And this place where the guillotine hair salon is actually the outside of the house they used to be like the first house they lived in.
Wow, no way.
Yeah. I mean, it was just used in the biopic, but it's just funny that the guillotine hair salon is in that building.
Have you read the Heroin Diaries? Have we talked about this ever?
I mean, I've read
maybe
books
years ago.
that I know. I mean, I certainly have read
Nikki Sixx.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, Nikki Sixx. So it's a great read, fascinating, and the way he's done it is really interesting. So in the throes of his heroin addiction in the late 80s, Nikki Sixx kept a diary, which he did not later have any recollection of keeping the diary. Oh, wow. So he's got almost everyday stories of what he was doing during a 1-year time in which he was declared dead twice in 1 year, only to be effectively resurrected by EMTs and in the hospital. The heroin addiction was so staggering. And what makes that year in this diary really, really interesting is he went back to all the people that played a role in that day.
Oh, wow.
And then showed him the diary entries, and they're like, you were so wrong. Here's what was actually happening. Well, you were in the throes of this heroin addiction and you were a complete ass. Here's what was actually happening. Blah, blah, blah. And so the other people would all get to comment on all of his diary entries. And it's a great read. The Heroin Diaries, Nikki Sixx, recommended.
Wow. See, you come for fantasy football and you get great book recommendations from members of hair metal bands, which it sounds immensely fascinating, though. It sounds immensely fascinating for the reasons that you set up. But I know one of the things that we can trace back, so much has happened in the times that we've spent together here on the couch, Paul. And I know one of the things that our friendship has helped for you is taking the dive into vinyl. And so what are you listening to right now?
You know, we ended last season and I had really started listening to a lot more jazz, and that has continued. And so I've continued to really expand my jazz vinyl collection and just how much I listen to jazz. And there's so much interesting history, fascinating history with jazz. And one of the it shouldn't surprise listeners to know that you helped me find this tremendous podcast, which is called A History of Rock and Roll in 500 Songs. It's been going for several years now. They're up to, I believe, around episode 180 out of the planned 500. But it starts in the 1930s.
Right.
To get the earliest roots of rock and roll started with swing, and then went firmly into jazz for a long period. And jazz really expanded into blues and country and a lot of other things that ended up having influences on rock and roll. And it's very hard you can't really pin any one song, band, person, time as like the genesis of rock and roll, but you can't tell the history of rock and roll without jazz. And there's so many great stories and so many great, amazing musicians, especially for the 50s, which is right in the era that I really like, is like, you know, early 50s to the early 60s, that I love that era. And so I've been listening to Cannonball Adderley and Miles Davis and, you know, a number of other just, you know, really fun, talented jazz players. And so, yeah, I've been listening to a lot of that for the last 6 months.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I have you to thank for a lot of the recommendations.
Well, I'd like to think that I know, at least for me, what music is good. And I've spent a lot of time over the years listening to a lot of music. And I'd like that you brought up the stories too. And that podcast is from a man who has a beautiful mind for detail and precisely, intricately telling a story all around just a song. I think the Dark Star Grateful Dead one is hours and hours long, which is a perfect meta thing, and so on.
Wow,
and
I haven't got there yet. Okay,
right. I mean, it's hours and hours and hours. You mentioned the history of rock and roll, though, and I have to mention, because I'm always caping for New Orleans, that you might say rock and roll started here. You might say rock and roll started at this place right down here on Rampart Street. That was a recording studio, Cosimo Matassa, I think, where the song "Tutti Frutti,"
wow,
by Little Richard, among others, was recorded. It then turned into a laundromat. I think it's a little like gift shop now, but there's a plaque in front of it. You know, there's a lot of stuff like that. And also, if you were to say a seminal rock and roll artist, one of the first names that should pop into a lot of people's heads is Fats Domino. I mean, when the Beatles came and played in New Orleans, they wanted to go see Fats Domino. They're like, take us to see Fats Domino. We can't believe that we're in the town where Fats Domino does. And Fats Domino's, like, his house, may he rest in peace, each one of the ancestors, of course. His house is still down there in the lower ninth. You still can see it painted up. And the guy who does our air conditioning was like friends with his son and told us all kinds of stories about hanging out. That he had a 2-story aquarium, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
And he loved New Orleans. There's a great story about Fats Domino when they finally got him out on the road after Katrina, and how, like, but still, no matter what they took, New York City, Times Square, whatever, he still wanted to be his partners. He just wanted to be back in New Orleans, hanging out with. That's all he ever wanted. And anyway, ode to that. But absolutely, the story of rock and roll, the story of American music, the story of jazz, and all of these things, it's a lifetime. I mean, you could spend a lifetime and not even come close to understanding you know, a quarter of it, because there's so much incredible material, so many incredible talented people. Go ahead.
There really is. And, you know, so many things that have been fascinating, hearing these early stories of rock and roll, how kind of lucky you had to be, how hard it was to be a Black musician through much of this time. But also, you know, these are the people who were making like all the best music, you know, and all the really interesting music. And the other thing that shocked me listening to A History of Rock and Roll in 500 Songs is how one person would record a song and it was pretty good. So like 10 other people would just go record the same song and they'd all get released. And, you know, maybe one of them would end up being a big hit, and people were just stealing, basically just straight up stealing from each other all the time. And man, the record deals were so crooked. The artists just getting absolutely murdered by their own record labels, their own agents. You know, it just, how little money ended up flowing back to the actual musicians is a reoccurring theme, and really sad too, by the way.
Yeah, I think that they say as you go through that podcast series and listen, you will find that there are very, very few actual good people in the music industry. Very, very, very few, at least in the period of the music industry that they're talking about. I should have been listening to that show. I know will listen to it more, but I want to say a quick ode to books, audiobooks, and specifically audiobooks of classics, because Paul's happened multiple times now. I think I brought up Huck Finn on the show before, but on other drives this summer, I listened to some Sherlock Holmes. Oh my gosh, Sherlock Holmes is incredible. Really? Arthur Conan, I just didn't remember how incredible the writing is, how incredible the character is, how much talk about heroin, how much there is.
What?
Like, Sherlock Holmes is like I get bored unless I shoot cocaine into my veins. What a character! Talk about Motley Crue. Sherlock Holmes could probably hang with Motley Crue on their tour, right? And we were listening to The Call, The Wild. I mean, the classics are just enthralling. Not everything that's in the canon, not everything that's a classic really deserves to be, but the ones that do, wow, it is more captivating than any cinematic experience, than any kind of immersive experience. And there's something about driving while you're listening to them, because you have just enough attention to be absorbing and fully in the imagination zone with the book, but you're still not crashing into the people in front of you. I feel like I could just drive around the country, going to cool places, visiting cool people like you, and listening to audiobooks for the rest of my life.
Just be happy
and be totally content.
Yes,
totally content.
Yes. I love it.
So totally content.
Is there one? So much of a good audiobook is the reader, the narrator, the voice talent. Have you found there's a person that you particularly like, or somebody that's helped? Whether it's I imagine I hope one person did a lot of the Sherlock Holmes, but that stuff's all, I think, public domain. So I think almost anybody could have.
They've all been good. I don't have any complaints about any of them, and none of them were like notable people that I noted their name. But what's fun is that they do all the characters, so you hear their style. They can't just read the book like you would read the newspaper or the telephone book.
No.
There's acting, there's a summoning up of, again, because you're with them, you're walking with them in the picture. And I can just say, and we listened to a few Eric Larson books too. Eric Larson books are tremendous.
Who's Eric Larson?
He did The Devil in the White City, the book about
I've got that on my shelf. I've been meaning to read that.
Yes, incredible book. We were listening to his book right now about the lead up to the Civil War. Listen to his book about the hurricane that leveled Galveston. May there be no hurricanes this summer. But contentment, as I've said before, something like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is really the pot of contentment, just like I feel every time I get to hang out with my good friend Paul Charchian, and all of you out there. You really power this. You inspire us to serve you, because you're the best, because you're so classy.